Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, she, he, and this is Literally Graphic. And today I'm doing another monthly TBR. This past month has had some hard days, so I have fallen behind just a smidge. So the swamp will have to wait. But I'm really excited for February's picks, so here we go. Starting off with the manga picks, once again, we are kicking things off with my final series wrap-up for Blank Canvas, my so-called artist's journey by Akiko Higashimura. I apparently did my initial thoughts review right before this whole panorama kicked off internationally, all the way back in January 2020. This is a short non-fiction series about Higashimura's time becoming a mangaka. Higashimura is the shoujo creator behind my much-beloved Princess Jellyfish series and the very meh to bad Tokyo Terriba Girls. For this series, Blank Canvas, I rated the first 2 volumes 4 out of 5 stars, and it's been an interesting window into how art school can go in Japan. Trying not to get too in over my head, my other manga pick for February is Helter, Skelter, Fashion Unfriendly by Kyōko Okazaki, a contemporary horror shoujo. I've definitely picked this one-shot up before, but apparently never logged it. I read Okazaki's other manga, Pink, back in 2015, and rated it 5 out of 5 stars. Quote, a story about a woman's vanity, greed, hatred, and despair, end quote. Helter Skelter was originally published between 1995 and 1996 and was translated by Vertical into English in 2013. For Mainstream Monday, we're continuing on my Sandman read-through with Volume 4, Season of Mists. Quote, 10,000 years ago, Morpheus condemned a woman who loved him to hell. Now, the other members of his immortal family, the Endless, have convinced the Dream King that this was an injustice. To make it right, Morpheus must return to Hell to rescue his banished love. And Hell's ruler, the fallen angel Lucifer, has already sworn to destroy him. End quote. Good times! Moving right along, as I just mentioned in my latest Black Comics TBR video last week, this month I'm looking to pick up Akissi by Marguerite and Mathieu Sapin. I've been looking forward to picking this up since I finished Abouet's Aya series. Quote, the plucky, troublemaking Akissi is back with her mischief on the Ivory Coast. This time she has to keep herself from drowning, stand up to a bully, make peace with her arch-nemesis, the prettiest girl in school, and evade a witch doctor's potion. End quote. Then we have the queer lit titles I want to pick up this month. Firstly, Fuck Off Squad by Nicole Goux and Dave Baker. Quote, a graphic novel that follows 3 would-be miscreants as they attempt to navigate the trials and tribulations of growing up in Los Angeles. Needless to say, it's the greatest comic about Instagram, skating, and low-key trying to date someone while you're still in a relationship ever made. End quote. Secondly, we have Coming Out Again, Transition Stories by Sabrina Symington. I reviewed her first book, First Year Out, a transition story, once again in January of 2020. Quote, following the interconnected lives of a diverse queer community, including asexual, polyamorous, trans, and multigender people, this empowering graphic novel explores a multitude of ways a person's identity and relationships can be expressed and can change over time. From Lily coming out as a lesbian after coming out as a trans woman, to Leanne embracing her genderqueer identity in later life, to Ty navigating their queerness with their autistic identity. These stories illustrate how life lived at the intersection of gender, sexuality, race, and class is often a journey with many chapters. End quote. I just found out about this book when my library bought a copy, and it looks so very fun. Next up, I'm reading the perhaps very timely Everything is an Emergency, an OCD story in words and pictures by Jason Adam Katzenstein. Another installment in my anti-ableism TBR. Quote, Jason Adam Katzenstein is just trying to live his life, but he keeps getting sidetracked by his overactive, anxious brain. Mundane events like shaking hands or sharing a drink snowball into absolute catastrophes. Jason has obsessive-compulsive disorder, a mental illness that compels him to perform rituals in order to protect himself from dangers that don't really exist. He checks, washes, overthinks, rinse, repeats. Everything is an Emergency is a comic about all the self-destructive stories someone tells himself over and over until they start to seem true. In images, surreal, witty, and confessional, Jason shows us that OCD can be funny, even when it feels like it's ruining your life. End quote. Then we have Sheets and Delicates by Brenna Thummler, published in 2018 and 2021, respectively by Oni Press and Lion Forge. Quote, Marjorie Glatt feels like a ghost. A practical 13-year-old in charge of the family laundry business, her daily routine features unforgiving customers, unbearable PE classes, and the fastidious Mr. Sobertuck, who is committed to destroying everything she's worked for. Wendell is a ghost, a boy who lost his life much too young. His daily routines featured ineffective death therapy, a sheet-dependent identity, and a dangerous need to seek purpose in the forbidden human world. When their worlds collide, Marjorie is confronted by unexplainable disasters as Wendell transforms Glatt's laundry into his midnight playground, appearing as a mere sheet during the day. While Wendell attempts to create a new afterlife for himself, he unknowingly sabotages the life that Marjorie is struggling to maintain. End quote. That'll be the March pick for the Realm of Comics Book Club, and I'm really interested in picking up this duology that I've heard so much about. Moving right along, next up, another translated French comic. I want to pick up Dungeons, The Early Years, volumes 1 and 2 by Joann Sfar, Christopher Blain, and Louis Trondheim. Quote, a darkly funny satire of fantasy that brings together the first 2 volumes of the series. This collection relates the origins of the vast history of Dungeon. End quote. It at least feels like it's been a minute since I picked up a fantasy title like this. I'm obviously super interested in reading everything by Joann Sfar and Louis Trondheim have ever done, so I could not resist this collaboration. And last, but certainly not least, I finally got my hands on Paying the Land by Joe Sacco. I just picked up my first Sacco just a couple months ago, and I've had my eye on this one since it was published in July 2020. Quote, the Dene have lived in the vast Mackenzie River Valley since time immemorial. By their account, to the Dene, the land owns them and it is central to their livelihood and very way of being. But the subarctic Canadian Northwest Territories are home to valuable resources, including oil, gas, and diamonds. With mining came jobs and investment, but also road building, pipelines, and toxic waste, which scarred the landscape, and alcohol, drugs, and debt, which deformed a way of life. In Paying the Land, Joe Sacco travels the frozen north to reveal a people in conflict over the costs and benefits of development. Sacco recounts the shattering impact of a residential school system that aimed to remove the Indian from the child. To, quote, remove the Indian from the child, end quote. The destructive process that drove the Dene from the bush into settlements and turned them into wage laborers. The government land claims stacked against the Dene nation and their uphill efforts to revive a wounded culture. End quote. A much praised book. I've heard many, many good things. And that's a wrap. It's nice to take a minute to really linger on all the books I'm looking forward to reading this next month. What are y'all's plans? By y'all, keep reading and organized in capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.